My father used to say that I was the biggest mistake of his life. He said it in front of relatives, neighbors, even at family dinners. When I was a kid, his words used to cut through me like sharp glass. I thought maybe one day when I'd grow up, he would see my worth, hold me proudly and say, "That's my daughter." But that day never came. Instead, the older I got, the more I became his disappointment. My name is Alyssa Carter, I'm 25 now, and if someone had told me 5 years ago that the same man who once called me a shame would one day stand silent while his powerful boss addressed me as Madam President, I would have laughed. But life has its own way of turning pain into power. My story began in a small town outside Dallas, Texas. My father, James Carter, worked as a senior manager in a large construction company called Stonebridge Holdings. My mother passed away when I was 14, and from that day our home turned cold. He blamed me for everything, for her death, for his misery, even for the bills he couldn't pay. When I told him I wanted to go to college, he laughed in my face. "College for what? So you can come back here and waste more of my money." He never believed I could be anything more than a burden. But I believed in myself, quietly, secretly. I applied for scholarships, worked at a local diner, and studied business management late at night when everyone else was asleep. I remember standing in that greasy diner, wiping tables at midnight, whispering to myself, "One day, Alyssa, you'll sit behind a big desk. One day they'll say your name with respect." That dream became my reason to breathe. When I graduated with honors from the University of Texas, I sent my father an invitation to my ceremony. He didn't come. Instead, he sent a short message. "Don't embarrass yourself by putting my name anywhere." I still went. I wore the blue gown, accepted my degree, and told myself, "You don't need anyone's approval to rise." After graduation, I applied for dozens of jobs. Most rejected me. A few offered low salaries that could barely cover rent. Then one day, I got a call from a well-known company in Austin, Stonebridge Holdings, the same place my father had worked for 20 years. I didn't know it when I walked into that glass building for the interview, but that place would become the ground where my revenge, my redemption, and my rebirth would all take shape. When the HR manager saw my resume, she raised an eyebrow. "Carter," she said, "any relation to James Carter, our operations manager?" I froze for a second, then smiled. "Yes, he's my father." Her lips curved slightly. "Oh, interesting." That "interesting" stayed in my mind the whole day. I got the job as a junior analyst, and I could see the shock on my father's face when he spotted me on the first day. He didn't greet me. He didn't even nod. He just whispered something to his colleague and turned away. I wasn't expecting hugs or smiles, but what came next was worse. Within weeks, I realized that my father had already poisoned everyone's mind against me. He told people I was a spoiled dropout, lazy, only hired because of sympathy. Co-workers treated me like I didn't belong. My reports were ignored, my ideas dismissed, but I didn't fight back, not yet. Because deep inside, I knew something he didn't know. I had been secretly working on a project during my final semester, a business innovation plan that had already won a national competition. That project had caught the eye of Mr. Raymond Blake, the CEO of Stonebridge Holdings, my father's boss. He had seen potential in it, but he didn't know it was me behind that plan, not yet. Fate was waiting for its moment. One night I stayed late at the office working alone. My father was still there, yelling on the phone about some missing report. He didn't know I was sitting a few desks away. He said, "If that girl keeps showing up, I'll get her fired. She's a walking embarrassment." Those words burned into me. That night I made a decision. If he saw me as shame, I'd become the kind of shame that would make him kneel. I refined my project, a detailed proposal to modernize the company's internal structure and increase productivity. I presented it anonymously through the innovation department's internal contest. Weeks passed, no one knew it was me. Then one Monday morning, the CEO, Mr. Blake, sent out an email. "The winning proposal belongs to an employee in our analyst division. I would like to meet the author personally in my office." My father was among the team called for the meeting. He didn't know who the winner was until I stepped into the CEO's office. His face drained of color. I smiled politely and handed my file to Mr. Blake. "This is my work, sir," I said. Mr. Blake looked impressed. "Miss Carter, your proposal could save us millions. I'm assigning you to lead this as our new project head." For a second the room was silent, except for my father's heavy breathing. He tried to speak. "Sir, maybe this is a misunderstanding." But Mr. Blake raised a hand. "No misunderstanding, James. You should be proud of your daughter. She's brilliant." That was the first time anyone had ever said those words about me, and I made sure my father heard them clearly. From that day, everything changed. I was given a new office, a team, and my own voice. My father avoided me completely, but his silence didn't stop the whispers, some out of jealousy, others out of disbelief. I worked day and night to prove that I wasn't just lucky, I was capable. Months later, when the project launched successfully, Mr. Blake invited me to a private dinner meeting with senior board members. I didn't know it then, but that dinner would be the night my father's world would finally crumble. He was there too, standing quietly behind Mr. Blake, serving wine, carrying files, acting like a shadow. I had never seen him so small. During the meeting, Mr. Blake lifted his glass and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate the future of Stonebridge, and that future is led by Miss Alyssa Carter, or should I say," he smiled, "Madam President of our new subsidiary division." The table applauded, cameras flashed, and my father, the man who once told me I was a shame, stood frozen, his face pale, his hands trembling. I didn't look at him at first. I simply smiled at the board members and said softly, "Thank you, sir, it's an honor." But inside me, a storm of memories screamed. Every insult, every night I cried alone, every time he said I wasn't enough. And as I turned my eyes toward him, our gazes finally met. He looked broken, and for the first time in my life I didn't feel pain. I felt peace. But this wasn't the end. Because power doesn't just change your name, it changes how people treat you. And soon, my father's fear would turn into something darker. He began following me, watching my moves, whispering to colleagues, trying to take back control. He wasn't just angry that I'd risen above him, he was terrified that I might expose his secret. A secret buried deep inside Stonebridge, one that could destroy him, his reputation, and maybe even the company itself. And that's where the real story begins. After that night, my life changed completely. People who once ignored me started calling me ma'am. The same co-workers who used to whisper behind my back now lined up to impress me. I had my own corner office with glass walls, a personal assistant, and authority that even my father couldn't question. But success doesn't come without enemies. And my biggest enemy lived under my own last name. My father avoided me for a while, pretending I didn't exist, but I knew him. He was the kind of man who couldn't handle losing control. Every day I could feel his eyes on me during meetings in the parking lot, sometimes even outside my apartment. At first I thought it was just guilt or jealousy, but soon I realized it was something much more dangerous. One evening, after everyone left, I stayed late at the office reviewing confidential project data. I noticed strange financial records linked to one of our construction sites, large sums of money being transferred to a fake vendor, the kind of thing that screams corruption. The signature on the approval forms caught my attention instantly. It was his. My father's. I remember staring at the papers, my heart pounding. My father wasn't just bitter, he was stealing from the company. For years. I closed the file quietly and looked out the window. The city lights below looked so calm, but inside me a war had begun. Part of me wanted to expose him right away, to finally destroy the man who destroyed my confidence for years. But another part whispered, wait. Let him dig his own grave. The next morning I acted normal. I smiled when I saw him at the coffee machine, even said, "Morning, Dad." He looked confused, maybe even scared. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "Nothing," I said, "just being polite." He didn't respond, but that was the moment I saw it, the flicker of panic in his eyes. He knew I was no longer the girl he could control. Over the next few weeks I started collecting evidence. Emails, documents, payment trails, everything pointing back to him. I built my case like a puzzle, piece by piece, until the full picture was clear. My father had created multiple fake vendors and used his position to move company funds into personal accounts. It wasn't just fraud, it was betrayal. He had been risking everything for greed while calling me the shame. Then one night, everything exploded. I got a call from my assistant at around 11 p.m. "Miss Carter," she said nervously, "there's a fire at the construction site downtown." I rushed there immediately. Flames were eating through one of the company's main warehouses. Firefighters were shouting, alarms blaring, and in the middle of all that chaos I saw my father. He was yelling at the site manager, furious, red-faced, sweating, but when he saw me he froze. I walked straight toward him. "What happened?" He didn't answer, his hands trembled. Later, after the fire was put out, the investigators found something shocking. Boxes filled with documents had been deliberately burned. Financial files, audit reports, the same ones I'd been reviewing. Someone had tried to destroy the evidence. That night I sat alone in my car and stared at the dark road ahead. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. When I answered, a voice whispered, "You should stop digging, Alyssa. You don't know who you're dealing with." My breath caught. It wasn't my father's voice. It was someone else, deeper, colder. That was when I realized the corruption ran deeper than him. He wasn't working alone. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I reached home, opened my laptop, and wrote an anonymous email to the company's internal audit department, attaching every piece of evidence I had collected. I didn't include my name. I just wrote one line at the end. "The truth always finds its way out." The next morning, the entire building was in chaos. Investigators from corporate headquarters arrived. Auditors locked offices, seized files, questioned employees. And by noon, one name was already being whispered in the hallways: James Carter. I watched him from my glass office as he was escorted out for questioning. He looked at me once, eyes full of rage. He knew who had done it. That evening he came to my apartment. He knocked once, then twice, harder each time. I didn't open the door, I just stood behind it and listened. "I know it was you," he shouted. "You think you've won, you think you're better than me, you'll regret this, Alyssa, I swear you will." Then his voice cracked, breaking into something between anger and despair. "You were supposed to be my little girl," he said quietly, "but you turned into my biggest enemy." I didn't respond. I let his words fade into silence. When I finally looked through the peephole, he was gone. The following week, the board suspended him. The media caught the story: senior manager involved in corporate fraud. My father's name was everywhere. Neighbors whispered. Relatives stopped calling. The man who once called me a shame was now publicly shamed himself. But revenge doesn't heal pain. It only silences it for a while. Sometimes at night, I'd remember him teaching me to ride a bike, his hand steady on my shoulder. I'd remember the good moments, the laughter before life broke him. I'd wonder when exactly he turned into the man I exposed. Then one afternoon, Mr. Blake called me into his office. He looked serious but calm. "Alyssa, I know this has been difficult," he said. "Your father's actions have damaged the company's trust, but I also know your leadership has saved it. We want you to take over full operations of the division." I nodded slowly, unable to speak. As I left his office, I saw employees watching me with admiration, the same people who once ignored me. But in my heart, I felt only one thing: exhaustion. Later that week, I heard that my father had been officially terminated. He packed his things and disappeared. No one knew where he went. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because I still didn't know who that mysterious voice belonged to, the one who warned me to stop digging. And sometimes when I worked late, I felt that same chill again, like someone was still watching. One night as I was leaving my office, I noticed a small envelope slipped under my door. No name, no address, just a folded note. It said, "You think you ended the story, but you just opened it." My hands shook. I looked around the empty hallway, but there was no one. That's when I realized my father's downfall wasn't the final chapter. It was only the beginning of something much darker, something bigger than both of us. And I was already in the middle of it. The note under my office door sat on my desk all night. I stared at it, turning the paper over and over. Whoever wrote it knew more than I did. Whoever it was had power. Whoever it was wasn't done with me yet. I spent the next few days working quietly, observing everything and everyone. Employees whispered behind their hands when I passed, some glancing nervously at my office, as if the walls themselves had secrets. I knew then that the stakes were higher than my father's misdeeds. Late one night, I returned to my office, reviewing the company's financial records again. Something didn't sit right. A few transactions were still unaccounted for, hidden under layers of shell companies. I traced them carefully, cross-checking everything. And there it was, a trail that led to the very top, not my father, not the managers under him, but one of the board members. Elliot Hawthorne, the man everyone respected, feared, and obeyed without question. My heart raced. Elliot Hawthorne had been overseeing my father's projects for years. He had benefited from the corruption and covered up for James Carter when things went wrong. And now he was trying to intimidate me into silence. I realized that I wasn't just fighting my father anymore. I was up against a predator hidden behind a polished suit, a man untouchable in the eyes of most. I had to be smart, I had to be careful. I began documenting everything, building an airtight case against him. Emails, memos, financial transfers, witness statements, everything. I hired a private investigator to follow him discreetly. I gathered proof not just of my father's mistakes, but of the massive corruption Elliot had orchestrated for years. The more I dug, the more dangerous it became. My office lights would flicker at odd hours. Strange calls came in, silent, breathing on the line. Shadows appeared at windows. It was clear he knew I was getting close. One evening, as I returned from a late meeting, I found my apartment ransacked. Files scattered, my laptop gone. Panic clawed at me, but I calmed myself. If he thought he could intimidate me, he was wrong. I had prepared for this. I had backups, I had witnesses, I had truth. I decided it was time for confrontation. The next morning, I requested a private meeting with Mr. Blake. I walked into his office holding every piece of evidence I had compiled. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't falter. I was no longer the scared girl my father had tormented for years. I was Alyssa Carter, smart, fearless, and unyielding. Mr. Blake, I said calmly, I have evidence of systematic corruption at Stonebridge Holdings. It involves both internal fraud and cover-ups at the board level. I need you to act before this destroys the company and everyone involved. He studied me carefully, then nodded. You've been thorough, I trust your judgment. Do what needs to be done. Within hours, internal auditors, legal teams, and federal investigators were mobilized. Elliot Hawthorne was confronted with undeniable proof. When he tried to deny it, witnesses and paper trails left him no escape. By the end of the week, he was suspended and under investigation. The news spread like wildfire. My father, who had once called me a shame, watched helplessly as the man he had once respected and feared fell from power. But I didn't stop there. I wanted him to see what real power felt like. I requested a meeting with my father in the now empty boardroom. He arrived, slouched, defeated, avoiding my gaze. Sit down, Dad, I said softly, yet with authority. You called me a shame for years. You humiliated me, ignored me, and tried to keep me small. But I didn't let you break me. I didn't let you define me. He tried to speak, but I cut him off. Look around, look at what's happened. You taught me one thing, that the world will underestimate me. And I've used that lesson to rise, not just rise, but to expose the truth and protect what matters. The company, the employees, even you in a way. Tears welled in his eyes. For the first time, I saw him not as a father or an enemy, but as a broken man realizing the consequences of his greed. I didn't know you were capable of, he began, voice trembling. I am, I said simply. And now I lead. Not just because I am capable, but because I refuse to be silent, because I refuse to be anyone's shame. After that meeting, he left quietly. I never heard from him again. Weeks later, I stood at a corporate gala, accepting an award for leadership and innovation. Mr. Blake, my colleagues, and even the press applauded. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment I had dreamed of since childhood. And there, in that room filled with admiration, respect, and recognition, I finally felt it, peace. I had taken the pain, the humiliation, and the lies, and turned them into strength. I had risen above the man who tried to destroy me. I had become a woman who could command respect not through fear, not through favoritism, but through courage, intelligence, and truth. As I left the gala, a reporter approached. Miss Carter, what would you say to young women who face humiliation or doubt from those closest to them? I smiled, a calm, knowing smile. Don't let anyone define your worth. Fight quietly, work harder, and when the time comes, rise so high they can't ignore you. That night, as I looked out over the city skyline from my corner office, I finally whispered to myself, I am no one's shame. And for the first time in my life, the past no longer had a hold on me. The girl my father tried to break had become a woman unstoppable.